Evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:03. Is anyone recording this meeting?
David Sanders, you're recording the meeting, right?
What's that?
I think Dave's recording the meeting.
Okay. We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Phil Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Kennedy. Patrick Kiernan. Absent. Lisa Murray. Here. Maura Ryan.
Here.
Michelle Boudreau. Here. If you would please stand, Lisa will be leading us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could please take a moment of silence. Jack Farrell passed away, who was a former teacher at TWB, vice principal of TWB, and principal of Green Meadows. He was a beloved member of our district and community. Thank you. We are going to begin with our student representative who's here with us this evening. This is Mackenzie Blair, and she's a sophomore at Minnetonka Regional High School.
I just want to come in and talk about something that was happening this past week at Minnetonka. I'll start with our flag football game. This was a fundraiser that we called for our juniors and seniors. This was one of our biggest fundraisers that we've been able to hold since 2019. We really enjoyed this fundraiser because it has great attendance for the year. It did this year, which was amazing. And sign up to play in the flag football game or to play as cheerleaders. We have all their families come out, and just most of the students love to come out and watch the games we play and look forward to what they're eventually being playing as part of the school and part of the fundraiser. Going along with that, we also have another fundraiser that's currently running, which is our Shake a Tail Feather fundraiser. This is happening right outside of our cafeteria. So with this, we pay 25 cents to add a feather to the teacher's name, or 50 cents to remove a feather from the teacher's name. And then at the end of this week, whichever teacher has the most feathers on their name will have to wear a costume on Tuesday during the entire day, which we always love. Teachers wearing costumes, stand outside of the school and welcome all the students. Going along with that, also outside of the cafeteria, we also had our class jewelry. The person outside of the cafeteria showed class jewelry. These were simply rings. We had students went over and just looked at the jewelry. They were for sale that day. We ordered, and they're still for sale online. So also order them. You have to contact our student activities, which would be Ms. Charlotte, our head of student activities. That's what I had.
Thank you.
So Mackenzie Blair is a sophomore at Minnetonka Regional High School. I know her mom's in the audience as well too. Joining us tonight as well too. And we know you have a busy schedule, Mackenzie, but we really thank you for coming with us. And this is actually her first time public speaking, as we heard, and she did a really great job. So nice job on that, Mackenzie. Oh, I'm gonna just do one last thing. Thank you, Mackenzie. Nice work. Very nice job.
Thank you for coming. So next, we are going to turn to the principal of Stony Hill, Mrs. Monique Danglis.
We may turn the volume up a little bit. Can everyone hear or not? For some reason, I can hear myself,
I think you're, yeah.
but I can't hear anybody else.
Talk a little bit louder. Is that good for everybody? Okay, good. Hold it a little closer too, so the masks don't help. So welcome everyone. I am Minnie Dinkless. I'm the principal of Stony Hill School. So welcome to our wonderful school here. I know that when the school committee is hosted by other schools, you often have wonderful performances by the students, but we don't have chorus, we don't have band here. We have second and third graders. So you've got me. And I'm just going to give you a few highlights of some really good things that are going on in our school. And I think it's a wonderful thing to be hosting these at different schools and just get a feel for all the wonderful things in our district. So I'm happy and honored to be able to share a few things with you today. Okay, next slide. So the first thing I wanted to share with you was a new event that we did at our school this year. It replaced a very beloved tradition, which is our Thanksgiving festival we've held for the last several years. We have, 800-900 people or more come, and it's a great family community event, and also a food drive, but it's all indoors. So we're not able to do that this year. So instead of just giving up, we decided to do something different. And we had what we call the Stony Hill Story Stroll, help fill the fridge, and I'll explain that a little bit. Next slide. So what is a story stroll? You may not have ever heard of these. They're called story walks sometimes. They're usually held by like a library, but we adopted the program or the system of it, what they do to work for us. So you take a storybook and you take pages, you blow them up so they're bigger. You put them outside so that families can stroll or walk along the path to read the book. And we added a little element of doing activities in each station, so that went with the theme of the story. So that's what a story stroll is. And you notice that it's that help fill the fridge. That's because it's based on a book called Maddie's Fridge. It's a wonderful award-winning book. It's recommended by the ADL because it deals with some issues like poverty and hunger in a very great child-friendly way. So I've been reading that story to every classroom for the last several years. So that seemed like a really good fit. So we used Maddie's Fridge, and the reason we called it Build the Fridge is because we also have a food drive. Okay, so how did this support academically? Well, we were very fortunate that the author of Maddie's Fridge, Lois Grant, she said that if you're going to do a food drive, I would do a free author visit. So she did a free virtual author visit. She zoomed in from Washington State, and it was one of, if not the best author visit we've had. And she not only talked about the true story of Matt's Fridge, which was really engaging, and kids were enthralled by that, but she also talked about the process of being a writer, and she inspired the kids about telling their own story. Anybody who knows second and third graders knows that they can be a little reluctant in writing, and she really sparked them. And I heard from many children who were very moved and motivated by her. So obviously people who benefited are our students, but also it was a great family event. Parents who see on some pictures really enjoyed it. And we raised about 700 pounds of food, probably one of the best turnouts that we had for food drive. The next slide, I'm just going to show you a few pictures. This was our welcoming team here. We had some very enthusiastic teachers, our mascot, June Belvin, and some National Honor Society high school students came to help out. And then we have just a family there starting with the first page. The next slide. And this is just one of the stations. Each of the stations dealt with a theme from the story. Next slide. The one on the left is children are writing about a time that they helped someone or that someone helped them. And that writing is being shared during our morning announcements. Next slide. That long table there is the children creating a friendship bracelet, which is of epic proportion, probably would stretch the span of the library, and it's on display in our lobby right now. Next slide. I just thought that was precious, because this is what we saw everywhere. It was just kids with their moms and dads reading the story together. Next slide. So I loved that picture on the left. And that boy is doing a character trait rock. So one of the stations was to take a rock and to write a character trait that you possess. And we're going to construct a little mini rock wall because the rock wall was a very integral piece of this story. Next slide. More good stuff. Next slide. The last station that we went to, they would fill out on a leaf with something they were thankful for, and they are absolutely adorable. And those are all hung on a tree, thing, indoor tree in our lobby, so kids get to see what everybody wrote. And I think that's it for the story walk. So the next good news I wanted to share is that we're excited about this. I don't know if it will excite everybody, but our students and our staff are very excited about our new library. We had a space that had went through several evolutions of how it was used. And it started to be less and less of a library and more of space that we needed, because we took a little cramped here at Little Stony Hill. So before you knew it, it was not an inviting space to read anymore. So over the summer, just kind of made it my personal pet project to completely renovate it. And it was very much by design. I did a lot of research on the best layouts for libraries and had a wonderful parent of a student who is a veteran librarian in another district. She sat with me on Saturday for a couple hours, gave me some pointers as well. And the whole purpose was to create and find a place where, the kids are reading on their electronics all the time. That's fine, but we wanted a nice, cozy place where they can curl up with a good book and learn to love reading. Because we want our kids that are trying to leave our schools to be passionate about reading. And so, next slide. I think I just said why we're the big library, so we covered that. What is different? Anybody who's been in our school before, I invite you to take a walk down there and take a look, because everything's different. Paint, furniture, tables, just everything. And it's set up so that when you go in, all the students go to this series of benches. And our wonderful new librarian, Kara, who we're very blessed, she's a retired second grade teacher from our district. And she's a perfect fit. She goes in there, reads stories with them. Every time they go to the library, they get a read lab. And she teaches through the read lab. And then the kids get up and shop for their books and then curl up in any number of the spaces that we have there. It's very inviting. How the changes impacted our students. It's unbelievable things that they have said. I spent the first several weeks observing, trying to see, how it's all going. And honestly, comments like, I can't wait to come back to the library. I want to be, I can't wait to get more books. It's like music to our ears as educators. Little girls, I want to be a librarian when I grow up. And, so the fact that they want to be in the library is a great thing, because guess what's there? Books and reading. So that was wonderful. And as for what's next, we have 2 days a week the library is being used. And so I've got ideas in mind as to how we can use it for creativity, for construction of, building, for STEM projects, for enriching activities, some academic games. We have a puppet show display, so the kids can write their own script. So I've got lots of ideas, and it's all just sort of still coming along. Okay, and last but not least, I'm very happy to announce that Stony Hill has been awarded for our academic achievement. So I'm sure you're familiar with the U.S. News and World Report. So every year they rank schools. And lo and behold, Stony Hill was ranked one of the Massachusetts best elementary schools.
I think it was this one.
So next slide, thank you. So yes, we have the distinction of being recognized as one of the best Massachusetts elementary schools. And that is, of course we celebrate here as a school, but honestly, this isn't just us. I mean, our families are our partners and they take their kids' education seriously, and we are eternally grateful for their support. Our students are diligent little workers, and they come in and they quickly learn that this is, and that's how you learn, and that's how you grow. They put themselves out there, they take chances,
The teachers set up high expectations and really good structure, and they know that this is a place where they're going to rise to their potential. And obviously, I have to say, I know I'm biased, but I think our staff is absolutely phenomenal. And they have done an incredible job. And I want to specifically say that our classroom teachers who are on the front lines teaching academics, but our paraprofessionals, our student services, our related arts, everyone from our administrative assistant to everybody, our nurses, everyone teaches the children something here at Stony Hill. So the credit goes to all of them.
So just for information, this is a wonderful thing that we should notice of, that Stony Hill is one of the best elementary schools in the U.S. News Report. There'll be an event where they will send us this banner and we'll be able to celebrate this as not only as a school, but as a school community, as a community as well too. We're really proud of Stony Hill making that list. We know it's ranked from all, not only the schools in the state of Massachusetts, but also the schools in the United States as well too. And we'd be remiss, we mentioned our teachers, we mentioned our students, we mentioned the staff and the parents, but also the instructional leader, Money Daniels, for the great work that she's done over these last years as being the principal and making Stony Hill accelerate, and obviously being one recognized not only in our community, but also in the United States. So congratulations to Stony Hill and Money Daniels. And it will absolutely be an event where we're recognized and have a nice celebration as a community for this as well too. Thanks, Monique. Thank you also for hosting us tonight as well.
Yeah, so it's my pleasure.
Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Danglis, whether it be about US News or about her presentation she did regarding Stony Hill and the book walk?
Al,
Yes.
can her presentation be posted on the website, because you're unfortunately being remote, you can't see it at all. And the audio isn't so great. So I can only see portions of it, but I would be very interested to see what her presentation actually looks like.
Oh, absolutely. We will make sure that we post it not only on on Stony Hill's website, but we also will post that on the district website as well too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Thanks again for hosting us and also for the lovely treats you made for us, for snacks for us as well. So thank you very much.
Congratulations, Monique.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have the need for executive session. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Law C-30A, Section 21A-4, to discuss the deployment of security personnel or devices or strategies with respect thereto. Section 21A-7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Law C-214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Student Record Law, Mass General Law C-71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Records Regulations, 603 CMR 23 et sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 USC Section 1232G and 34 CFR Part 99 regarding student transfer requests.
Do you have any idea how long this will be?
So we're thinking maybe 45 minutes to the max, we're expecting this to be.
All right, so moved.
Second.
So we'll do roll call vote.
So can I just want to make sure, so before we officially go into executive session, can we just introduce our guests that are going to join us for executive session that are in the audience with us tonight? Mr. Willett, if you could start first.
Ken Willett, and I've been retained as a safety and preparedness consultant for the district.
Dan Menard, Wilbraham Police School Resource Officer. Scott Tromley, Chief of Police of the Town of Hill. Mike Rivers, Fire Chief of the Red Flag. Edward Bourne, Fire Chief. Patrick Farrar, Deputy Chief of Fire.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Sorry, I just want to make sure that before we went officially to the executive session that we did those introductions. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. So roll call vote, we will do Cheryl Caravana. Aye. Sean Kennedy.
Aye.
Lisa Marie. Aye. Laura Ryan.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Michelle Boudreau. We will return after executive session.
Those. Yes, thank you. We should do that. Yep. Yep. Thank you. You're all set there.
I just texted her. She's like, I know the person.
Okay.
She didn't have. She definitely was. I think she definitely was.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you. Right? It's like that should one of them be able to- their tech.
Tonight, Lisa Curtin and our instructional coaches will be sharing with you some early grade data, the work that has been done, and what we also need to do as we move forward. This data will also show you the importance of the role of our coaches, working with our teachers to help move these students and accelerate the path forward. But this time, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Curtin, our Director of Professional Learning Curriculum Instruction. She's going to be introducing our instructional coaches, and they're going to be showing us some of the data that's taken place in our district. Lisa.
Thank you, Superintendent Gannon. School committee, I'd like to introduce our elementary instructional coaches. First, I have Nicole Remillard-Morin. She's a certified reading specialist with 6 years in our district, taking on positions such as Title I reading, reading intervention, and an instructional coach. Next, Kelly Spazzarini. She's a certified reading specialist as well. 5 years in our district as an elementary classroom teacher, and this is her first year as an instructional coach. And then Megan Ferrara is a certified math specialist with 9 years in our district as an elementary classroom teacher, and this is her second year as an instructional coach. I just wanted to tell you a little bit of what the coach's role is. The coaches work closely with me in the curriculum office, and they work extensively collaborating with building administrators and teachers to support the school learning goals in three big focus areas: curriculum, data, and professional learning. So in terms of curriculum, just a few examples of what the coaches are doing. They support strong knowledge of grade level content and the implementation of standards-based curriculum and assessments. They provide access to materials and resources that teachers can use to engage learners. In terms of data, they support the data cycle. That's something they're going to speak to tonight. And that includes data analysis, data team meetings, supporting the principals in running those meetings, developing goals and action steps, and guiding discussions regarding targeted instruction. And in terms of professional learning, they facilitate professional learning on topics that are related to curriculum and instructional practices, looking at different materials and resources to use, analyzing student work samples. And this can look like a whole group professional learning opportunity. It can be grade level team meetings, one-to-one conversations, modeling in classrooms, a whole host of professional learning opportunities. So tonight you're going to have
the chance to look at some of the K-5 beginning of the year data. And coaches are going to help explain how the teachers are using this data to support student learning K-5. So I'm going to hand it over to the coaches.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. Tonight we're going to have an opportunity to show you just one of the ways that we are facilitating and supporting the work here at Hwrsd. We're going to show you how we use data to support each of our students and continually ground our decisions with student learning. We're going to talk about one of the assessments that we use to start the year off, and we're going to show you our data and then just some of the ways that teams work together collaboratively within a way to come up with the meeting with a goal.
So the first step is that we gather the data. A universal screener is just one piece of the data that we as educators use to help drive our standards-based instruction. The universal screener is relatively quick to administer, and it helps us know in general where students are at and where we need to look more closely. When we're administering the universal screener, we're casting a really wide net. So here are the subtests that we administer to students at the K-5 level. You'll notice that the subtests in kindergarten and first grade are very specific. These tests reflect the foundational skills that are necessary to develop early reading and early math skills. The kindergarten early reading composite is comprised of 4 different tests. The first test is concepts of print, where students are assessed in things like the orientation of the page or the text that you're reading used from left to right. The onset sound, students are given the first sound of a word and they can into a picture that matches that. So for example, like which word starts with the sound "b," they would point to the ball. Letter names, students are identifying what sound the letter, or sorry, what the name of the letter is, and letter sound, what sound that letter means. The kindergarten early math composite is comprised of 3 different subtests. Match quantity, where students are given a group of dots and they point to the digit that matches the quantity of those dots. Number identification, where they identify the name of each digit. And number sequencing, where they work with an account sequence. Questions for that are things like, I can start counting, when I stop, I want you to keep going, or can you identify the number that comes between 7 and 9. In grade 1, the early reading composite is made up of 4 different subtests. In word segmenting, students identify the individual sounds that make up the word. Nonsense words, students are using traditional spelling patterns to decode nonsense words, something like it. In sight words, we are identifying students' ability to quickly recognize high frequency words. In the sentence reading composite, students are reading just a short couple of sentences across a page. The grade 1 early math composite is made up of 3 subtests. Decomposing, students are taking apart and putting numbers back together. Number identification, they're identifying the names of each digit, and number sequencing, they're continuing to work with the common sequence. Students in grades 1 through 5 take the aided reading test, which is just short reading passages that they're answering questions about, and the CDMR assessment test oral reading fluency. Students read 3 short passages, and then we get a reading rate of how many words they can read in. Students in grades 2 to 5 take the AMAP assessment, which just means conceptual math understanding, things like computation and problem solving. So if we look at our kindergarten data, we're looking at our data, we're looking at our national norms. So what we're really looking at is where nationally our students are falling. The range of scores between the 30th and the 84th percentile, which is the green bar on our screen, represents typical performance. These are our students that, to your point, grade level curriculum is accessible for. We've identified those students that are within that green range but fall below the 50th percentile, which is that line that you see on the graph. And those are students that we're really closely monitoring to make sure that they continue to make that progress and stay within that mean range. They're kind of at that lower end of the typical range. The range of scores between the first and the 29th percentile are the red and green bars, or sorry, the red and yellow bars that you'll see up there, and those are students that are in need of targeted instruction. And the range of scores between the above the 85th percentile represents our accelerated learners. So if you look at the early math or the early reading deposit, 77% of kindergarten students fell in that 30th to 99th percentile range. And in early math, 77% of students also fell in that 30th to 99th percentile range. In grade 1 early reading, 55% of students fell between the 30th and 99th percentile. In A reading, 76% of students fell between the 30th and 99th percentile. And in A math, 70% of our students fell between the 30th and the 99th percentile. In grade 2, on the A reading test, 68% of our students fell between the 30th and the 99th percentile. On the CPMR, 69% of students fell between the 30th and the 99th percentile. And in A math, 82% of students fell between the 30th and the 99th percentile. In grade 3, we had 80% of our students fall in that range on A reading, 73% between the 30th and 99th percentile on CDMR, and 89% of students fell between the 30th and the 99th percentile on A math. For grade 4, we had 80% of our students fall between the 30th and the 99th percentile in A reading, 70% for CDMR, and 80% for A math. And then in grade 5, we had 85% of students score between the 30th and the 99th percentile on A reading, 75% on CDMR, and 83% of students in A math. So when we're looking at all of this data, we're doing so through the lens of COVID. We know that students have had interrupted education for the last year and a half, and therefore there are some academic and social emotional ramifications of that.
So we spent our time at the fall data meeting, redefining our data meeting protocol. We wanted to come together as a K-5 clinical team to strengthen our practice at looking at data. So we analyzed student data, we set grade level goals, and we strategized tangible action steps, how we're going to reach that goal. What did we accomplish during this time? So we wanted to make sure that we were using our time together to collaborate and plan over the data. We were able to look at the student data closely, create instructional practices that we will show an example of later on through the grade levels, and create an action plan on how we will reach that goal. We are continuing to spend a lot of time reflecting on our instructional practices and how they support all that we are trying to do for our students. We are reflecting during our curriculum planning time with grade level teams, and we keep following up on this until we get to the winter data meeting as well. Our K-5 district shared vision was focused on the fidelity of Tier 1 instruction. So the vision of the fidelity of Tier 1 instruction is in response to the ongoing effects of COVID. DESE is urging districts to look at the fidelity of Tier 1 instruction to better support 100% of our students. So Tier 1 instruction is high quality, standards-based instruction for all students. It is the instruction that every single student receives. Our focus is moving forward. So when we're looking at that, focusing on accelerating rather than remediating, we are also providing high level of support to all of our students, but we do need to keep moving forward and provide those new understandings to students. So going into more information about the acceleration, what we mean by that is when we think about traditional remediation, it's based on the misconception that for students to learn new information, they must master everything that they missed first. Whereas acceleration strategically prepares students for success in the present. It is important to know that acceleration is not just plowing forward without student understanding. We are being purposeful when we are providing in what we're providing for students. For example, to prepare for teaching new concepts,
We want to provide prior knowledge ahead of time to bridge to the new learning. We also want to continue to provide students with an entry point to grade level standards for active hands-on learning. So we asked our teams, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get there? So by prioritizing and planning, we are ensuring that our instruction will support student achievement. We are going to lean heavily on the fidelity of our program's pacing and curriculum. An example of that is prioritizing our reading and phonics program at the K-2 level. We are also following our daily lesson trainings to benefit student learning, to also ensure that all students are receiving the same tier 1 instruction throughout the district. As educators, we hold ourselves to a high standard of accountability and responsibility to the students and families here at Hwrsd. And we will be successful by being responsible to one another, collaborating and preparing ourselves to improve our practice, but most importantly, to be vulnerable to one another to help. This is the analysis protocol that teams follow. It was a very structured step-by-step process. This is our end product. Every grade level team left with our goal. So the goal by the next assessment period of January 2022, all students will attain typical to impressive growth. They left with a literacy instructional practice and a math instructional practice, along with agreed upon an action plan and steps. And you'll notice at the bottom that all teachers are planning to self-monitor and adhere to the implementation of the action plan by agreed upon steps. That's it.
Thank you, Mary and Kelly and Nikki, and that was a lot of information. And so if you have any questions, we have just a couple minutes to take any questions. I know you have a copy of the presentation. Look more closely at some of the parts.
So what is the ratio between students and reading specialists? Or what the specialists that are here? The report that you're doing, what's the ratio? Like how many students do you guys see each, or that all specialists are you agree?
So the instructional coaches are not providing interventions with students. We have each building has a reading specialist that is providing interventions.
Right.
But the instructional coaches don't provide interventions directly to students.
But what is the ratio for the reading specialists? We have not reading specialists.
I think that I'll speak for the curriculum office and from conversations having with principals, we love more interventionists across the board, whether it's in reading or in math. And that's something that I think we'll be continuing to think about in terms of, right now we're looking at providing more social emotional support at the schools, and the next step would be to look at interventionists. And it's just difficult to hire people, but we've been kind of brainstorming creatively about if there are retired teacher friends that are out there that would be willing to would not maybe work full-time, but perhaps 10, 12 hours a week that would really be a benefit. So that's kind of in the planning process. So we could definitely use more interventions, especially I think one of the things that teachers are facing is kids are the skills that our students are showing are not that much lower than they've been in past beginning of year data collections. But there's this extra layer of having a disrupted learning situation last year. Just those soft skills of like, how do you manage a class? How do you in class? How do you sit on the carpet and listen? The teachers are having to spend lots more time supporting students in that way. How do you work together and talk to other peers? So that's adding an extra layer of challenge to the work that they're doing every day. So I think they would definitely be appreciative of some extra intervention support for those particular students that need a lecture.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you guys have been at this for a couple of months now. Can you take us through what you've seen thus far, how the interventions are working? And, maybe give us a rundown of sort of what you would see for a particular student and what their day would look like. I'm curious, I think folks in the public would be interested too, just to know, what have we seen thus far? Where do these kids really sit? What are some of the trends that we're seeing? And then, for a typical kid, what does all of this look like?
And can I just add on top of that? I think that's absolutely, and then also lead into what's happening during our common planning time meetings, when you guys as our coaches, again, everybody needs coaches, right? Tom Brady has a coach, what you're doing with the work with our teachers to talk about that as well too. So if you can add that common planning time meetings, it'd be really great for the school committee as well as people who need to know the work you guys are doing.
So during planning time.
By the way, you don't have to hold this, just you put it down. Raise your hands up.
We're doing here. No, so during common planning times, we meet with grade level teams weekly to support teachers with student learning. So in order to support student learning, we have to do a lot of reflection, we have to do a lot of previewing, we have to do a deep dive into our standards-based instruction, and reflect on who we are as educators to better student learning. So that's more of like a tier 1 way of doing it in regards to what you're asking for intervention. That's more of like the reading specialist or the reading interventionist position to use data and that data cycle to then look at those tier 2, tier 3 students to pull them, for 3 to 4 times a week.
A couple of things that are we're doing more not as an intervention for specifically for small groups of students, but working with tier 1 in terms of math, building that fluency, because that's always something that we're struggling with at the elementary level, is knowing their facts, the best way to learn them. And we were able to secure some really great resources for building that fluency, and we're doing some training with the K-5 teachers and paraprofessionals on November 23rd. So it's something that they can use as a tier 1 support for all students to lift them up in that weaker area, but then it can be used in smaller groups as they kind of plow other data. This set of data is just one lens, but the teachers have observational data, other screenings that they're doing in the classroom, assessments, so they can pull those groups together and they're building back fluency math units. We also have expanded our foundations, which is the foundational reading skill unit, to the 3rd grade too. And so that again can be provided. Teachers are going through the training right now, and then they'll be able to implement that as a tier 1, and then also use it for smaller groups, boost up those students that need extra. So our classroom teachers are doing some super heavy lifting with that and doing a great job with it.
Yeah. Now, the data that you saw in K1 through 5, the data that you saw in K1 through 5, given a year and a half of remote instruction, was that something that you expected, or were you surprised at where kids fell in that spectrum?
I think I have a combination of both. Fortunately, we look at the mass data and assessments for a couple of years. So we can look at that longitudinal data and see historically that this is where kindergartners score the fall, this is where 5th graders score the fall. And so our data is a little bit lower than it typically is, which is the anticipation coming in. But it's not incredibly off. It's not something that we're looking at like, oh dear, we are, we really have a lot of. But that is kind of why Jesse's directing us and why we're really one instructional practices. Historically, we look at data and then we're looking at kind of that smaller subset of kids we want to intervene and provide that targeted instruction. As of the last year and a half of instruction, we're ensuring that 100% of our students are getting targeting really specific learning so that they're able to reach those grade level standards and continue to report those skills.
And you guys did a great job, and our teachers are working really hard. But when we're looking at data like we're seeing, and we keep referring to tier 1, so when we're seeing data that way, that means as a whole, every student in that classroom can benefit from that instruction that's happening. When you're talking about tier 2 data, it's okay, I gotta take Michelle, I gotta take Amy and Bill and Cheryl, maybe off in a small group and give them that second piece of the pie, right? Have them give them a second opportunity to reinforce it. Tier 3 is when we're dealing with students with IEPs. But when we're looking at our data the way it is right now, we're seeing, okay, all the students in the class could benefit from this instructional practice. And that's the data they're looking at, and that's the work, and trying to get those students to move. So we're not having to do all these tier 1, but right now we know that that's where we're at.
And then finally, one last question. As we head into budget season for next calendar year, what do you guys see as needs for the elementary grade levels to support that ongoing learning for those students, especially with the gaps that we're seeing because of the remote?
Go ahead, Lee, you tell me all day long, and Mrs. Curtin all day long. Tell them what you need. Go ahead. You know.
I think that the response with, clinicians at the K-8 level really targeting the phonic skills has been great this year. We've also integrity, which helps with those early reading skills. Data 5, we're working on that building that fluency that teachers will be trained in next Tuesday. So I think those really investment in those programs is going to be key for us. I think moving forward, as Lisa mentioned, prevention is huge. Right now, the K-5 level, we have a lead specialist providing the prevention at each grade level building. We have math interventionists. So I think that would be something moving forward that would be great.
We're also looking at, we're involved in the network with the Department of Ed, looking at high quality instructional materials for literacy. So that's going to cost some money, and we want to make sure that we're providing the highest quality materials that what we need for students and are also that teachers can use and be effective. We're looking at elementary math programming as well to do the same thing. So money for material supplies, but training, big things. We want to make sure that our teachers feel like they are ready to do what they need to do.
You notice I keep on so over it.
I know.
Yes, if I can say, that every single item that has been mentioned by all of you is built into our ESSER plan. So, I think Lisa spoke to dealing with social, emotional issues, bringing students back into schools, having them ready to learn was our first goal. We are actually working to hire some more adjustment counselors to provide some support. We've done some really tremendous professional development with Jessica Minahan that we're working on. And the next step is, now that we have some assessment data, students who are ready to learn in classrooms, we're going to be able to throw the kitchen sink at students in terms of support academically. So we have adjustment counselors in the queue, and we can immediately start engaging them with students as soon as we have these resources. We have training time, we have instructional resources, and then everything was mentioned.
So one of the things you're going to see, one of the things you're going to see when we met this week with all our principals on math scores, we had some difficulty in math at all grade levels at all schools. And so one of the things that I think you've heard our coaches and Mrs. Curtin talk about is math interventionists, because that's where it's our most vulnerable place right now.
If I can, one more item, I also want to say, and I know that there are all independents from listening, and at least one, and I think one of the biggest things we heard from the community was also their intent for students to return to school and be ready to learn before we started throwing things like interventions. So it was the social emotional. So it's our staff, it's our teachers, it's feedback from the community that all of that was based on. And that's how we're progressing.
Now, the ESSER grants, that program in 2024.
Yeah.
So we're building all of these interventions into what we're doing right now up until 2024. 2024, that money vanishes, right? Do we think that leading up to 2024, we're going to be able to get kids back to where they need to be. Because those additional supports, when we start talking about bringing in math interventionists, adjustment counselors, I wish we could do it for everybody, but at some point, it's gonna reach a tipping point on the budget.
Sure.
You know, so the question that I would ask is, do we think that's sufficient time, or do we need to be looking at some serious adjustments in the budget going beyond 2024?
And I would defer to the left of the table, because these guys are the specialists, right? I go to them myself to say, what do we need? What's the work? Because they're the ones that are working with our teachers and our students as well.
I have a question for Lisa and you guys. I know what integrity is, and I know what foundations is, so I wanted to know when you say you're looking for materials, are you looking for like a core literature-based language arts program materials? Is that what you're looking for when you say that? Okay, and the same thing for math. Okay.
And you know what, I think at another time, we need to have you come back, ladies, because I don't think everyone knows what integrity is, and I don't think everyone knows what foundations is. I think that'd be really important for us to share. I mean, the educators in the room might, but others might not, so I think it'll be real important.
I also have a question about the data, because this data program you've been using for years, as I remember. Does the program let you look back? Like, how far back does it let you look at student data? Like, can you go years back and look? Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, you can, and what's tricky is because of when we came back last fall, COVID and hybrid, we just, it was too much of an undertaking to collect this data last fall. So we have kind of a blip in the data from last year. But we do have longitudinal data that we can look at for students. It's really very powerful to look at the students' growth chart over, you know, since they were in kindergarten, now they're in fifth grade. So we have that for teachers to be able to use to see what does their growth trajectory look like? Are they moving along in the way that we would hope when changes to be made to it?
When you're looking at their data and picking the students, are you always looking at the national, or do you ever look at the state? Or how are you, you know, how you see it? Okay. Are you always using the national data?
Use all of that.
Do you use a math to pick the kids that are going to get the extra tier 2 or like tier 3? Like, what are you using? BAS? Are you using a combination of everything? Who to choose for getting tier 2 and tier 3?
So we're using pieces of them. So yes, definitely fast class, like also thinking about teachers, thinking about any type of assessment that they do. Sorry. So yes, so that's all things
You're not speaking, just turn on. Just press it on.
Something's coming from here. The owl.
You have a very aggressive goal here that by January 2022, all students will attain typical to aggressive growth. That's, I've never seen a goal that had all students. Let's say it just didn't happen. We didn't have all students. What is your plan? So how you work that with the teacher of those students, that student that didn't get typical growth? Do you do it in teams? Do you do it individually in conflicts? Do you do it with the student and the teacher together, the modeling? What do you do?
Right. I'm sure like what do we do if we don't meet this goal for every student? Is that correct?
No, my question is, I don't think anyone meets all students' goals. So I think there will be some students that will not make it to the goal. What do you do in terms of coaching the teacher and assessing the student that coaching role?
So we've had a lot of opportunities during our planning time to look at student work and to go through the student work to see who is making the growth that you're expecting to see, and then we can plan with that particular teacher or with a couple of teachers to change up the instruction or to strengthen small group instruction to hopefully get them to meet this goal.
So I guess what I'm asking is beyond that, you guys students to the staff teams?
Yes.
People, done everything?
Yes.
How do the three of you interface with the staff?
I think that they could consult with the stat team if a teacher were to bring the student to stat. And they would, when the teacher comes to stat, they are able to say, I have done X, Y, and Z to support the student. One of the things I did was consult with the math coach to see if there was something that I was missing in the work or, as a resource, but they would be responsible for bringing students to stat.
This is true. Can you just do us a quick synopsis of what staff is? Because I think some people are listening and saying, so I just want to make sure we're throwing on acronyms that everybody knows what we're referring to.
Our stat team are building-based student teacher assistance teams, and it's when a teacher is concerned about students' progress. It could be academic progress or social emotional. They would come to the student teacher assistance team in their building and present, here's what the student's strengths are, here's where the student is struggling, here are the different things that I've tried to support this student, and then it's like a big think tank together with the parent and at many schools, and then say, what are the things we can put in place and set a time limit on them, and then check back in after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and see if our supports have worked for that student. And so the staff team is kind of almost can be used as almost like a pre-referral. So if the student is struggling and tries very targeted, very time-bound interventions, then we're able to see, did that work, or is there something else? So that's the quickest I can do with the staff, but it is like a great think tank, special educators, other classroom teachers, speech people, adjustment counselors, all saying, hey, here's something that we can try, let's do it.
But there's really no bridge between coaches and the staff team, it's the teacher coming forward.
Sure, that's the teacher is the initiator of that. And sure, if a coach were speaking with a teacher and they were kind of struggling, we all say to each other, I think this is an opportunity for staff for this student. The other thing I do want to say is I think it's important for us to say all students will attain growth. We need to say it. We know that there are reasons why some students won't, but we have to all go with the same commitment to, we're gonna do whatever we can to help all students attain growth.
There are some districts that say 80% of our students are going to attain growth. None of us on this side of the table, I'm sure on this side of the table, are comfortable with the 20% that aren't. So that's why we always believe that all of our students are going to show growth. And that's philosophy that we believe in as a district.
So I'd just like to thank all of you for the professionalism and dedication that you bring to your positions. It's obvious from the work that you've done that you guys really take it seriously. And to the teachers in the district, I would say the same thing. I mean, the amount of effort that goes into teaching. I had the opportunity this fall to coach my son's Pee Wee football team. They won the Super Bowl, we Westfield the Super Bowl. 3rd and 4th graders, and I can tell you that the term herding cats found new meaning, and I only had 8 of them, so I can't imagine a classroom of 24 of them. And so hats off to the teachers for the work that they do. Thank you very much for coming today.
And you know, it's one of the things that we hear all the time, and I know Mr. Kenny, we hear you say, our teachers are working really hard. Everybody is working extremely hard. So one of the ways that these instructional coaches are how do we support our teachers? How do we help out looking at student data? How do we help out looking at the curriculum? How do we help out looking at this assessment? So when we come to these meetings, common planning time meetings, that's the work. And by the way, it's consistent across our district. So what's happening, the conversations are happening in Camden, are happening in Wilbraham, it's happening across our grade levels as well too. I travel from school to school to school. Please remind me what day that professional learning was. And all of them having the same conversations about their individual students, about the data was absolutely phenomenal. That our entire district, thanks to the work that our curriculum director, our coaches, and our teachers are doing, we're all trying to move in that same direction. It was phenomenal professional learning.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Bill, for recognizing that teachers are working really hard.
Yeah.
There's a layer added on to this school year that is like describe what it is, but it's just, it's different and it's extra hard and they're bringing it 100% every
They are.
day and more.
You can see it, you can see with the break these kids have in the formality of education. You know, for a lot of them, it was kind of foreign territory, getting back into the idea of learning how to learn. You know, so, you know, you can't say enough, especially after the experience I had. Wonderful experience, I'll do it again next year, absolutely, but, you know, definitely an eye-opener for me, so thanks very much.
Does anyone else have any other questions? This will not be their first and only time that will be coming to, because they need to talk about Hwrsd. They need to talk about foundations and the assessments that we're doing and the things that are taking place on it. Please, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you 4 seconds so I can say thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to continue moving on. We are going to go to the health updates.
Sorry.
Everybody, you know, kind of simplified the data a little bit. But, so I'm going to read through the whole thing, so I'm happy to introduce Dr. Patrick, talk about the COVID vaccine. Very important. And the data currently is, you know, staying pretty steady. We've had a little low in cases, unfortunately. We're heading into the winter months, so, you know, people are going to be indoors a little bit more. And so, you know, this time will naturally viruses start to increase. And so we just have to put that. The data for the state is, you know, 27. I think last time we reported 22. And the county has a positivity rate of 0.15, and Wilbraham is at 2.26. We will have a little increase. We've had a little last 4 days. We had about 20 cases. And we're kind of mostly I'm seeing trend the elderly practices a lot of people with 60, 70, and if we could slow down a little bit here, I think that the testing state program has gone very well. We tested a total of 64 students that has tested negative and some like class where that we have a lower number of students that we might change the right. Is currently at about 65% of staff and students are currently fully vaccinated. So we up there 15% will get us to 80. That would be wonderful. We have clinics coming up on Sunday, and that will be held at in town hall, and that's focused on 5 to 11-year-olds. And we're going to have another clinic on November 30th, and we're inviting pretty much everybody to that clinic. They're offering all vaccines for kids. They're offering boosters, so I'm hoping that the town of Camden will take the opportunity to get vaccinated.
So, thanks, Kara. So just one of and again, we gave you a lot of data last time. We heard from feedback from people. It's too much, so we try to simplify it. I think the biggest thing that people are asking for the percentage of students and staff at Minichog, they'd be the only one that'd be able to reach that 80%, right? Because the younger students in the other grades aren't able to get the vaccinations yet. So right now we're at 65 at Minichog. I think the biggest thing we got to look at, that number of 64 students that were tested today that we've been, and they've been 0 that have tested positive, right? They've all been negative. So all those students have been able to, in the past, would have had to be quarantined and staying at home, receiving their education. They were able to come into TWB, get tested, negative, go right back to school. We're going to continue that. Just a little FYI, there is no longer the National Guard is doing it, but CIC, which is the originated company of this, is now performing those tests at TWB as well. Right now, we have 2 students that are remaining in that testing state that we're almost working our way out as
Yeah,
well.
no,
too.
we got a couple cases today, so, there'll be 2 more students tomorrow.
Any questions about the data at all? Great. Again, can't stress strong enough that we're going to be having the vaccination clinic on November 30th for adults and for children. If you want the booster, if you want that first part of the test, the initial part, please go there from 3 to 7 o'clock.
3 to 7.
3 to 7 at TWB. And we sent out an email to everyone in the community yesterday. Thank you. So my pleasure now for many who had an opportunity to meet before, but for those our school physician, Dr. Amy Casper is going to talk to us a little bit about the COVID vaccine for our students from 5 to 11 years old. Dr. Casper.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. Hi there. So I thought I would start by just kind of reviewing the timeline of as the vaccine is rolled out. Pfizer was the first one officially given the EUA emergency use authorization last December. That was for 16 and over. And shortly after that, Moderna received their EUA, and those were for 18 and over. Pfizer was next up to get the teenage group, so the 12 to 15-year-olds, they were added in May. And just as of October 29th this year, the 5 to 11-year-olds were granted the EUA. I was looking for data to see how many doses, and it says worldwide 7.3 billion doses of the COVID vaccine, all different types, have been given. And I found it really interesting that between October 29th and November 12th in our country, roughly 1 million kids received their first dose of the COVID vaccine, which is great. This might be a little bit hard for people to read. I was trying to squeeze it in, but I basically wanted to show sort of how vaccines are developed because it relates a lot to the questions I get from parents about our vaccine. There's usually 4 phases that are gone through once a vaccine is sort of envisioned and produced, and then they have to test it. So phase 1 is usually about 20 to 100 healthy people that are willing to be a guinea pig, and they try it out, and they're basically looking for serious side effects. And does this produce an immune titer? They get their blood drawn at certain time periods afterwards, and okay, did it cause an immune response? If that looks promising, they move to phase 2, where we now give it to several hundred people, and they're looking for more of a long-term effect, and over several months, do we see side effects, and what do we see happening with the titers? Is this showing that it's building immunity to it or not? Phase 3, they start to enlist literally thousands or more volunteers. And this is where we're really trying to figure out how does this work in terms of, are the people that are getting the vaccine staying healthy versus the community? And I think, one of the benefits or the situation we had with COVID over the last year is it ran like wildfire. So it did not take long for that data to show up in the volunteers. Separating them out from the general population, did those people that got vaccinated seem to stay healthier? And the answer was yes. And then phase 4 is basically once it gets a full approval and it's a regular vaccine given on a normal schedule, and they continue to monitor it for side effects, length of immunity, how long does it last, we need to do boosters and that kind of thing. I've had a lot of families, parents ask me, well, doesn't this seem kind of rushed? And in some ways, yes, it might feel like that, but if you dig beneath the layers and really see what has happened, it's not something that has jumped over the normal steps of a vaccine development, because this happened in such a different way than previous vaccines. The 2 initial vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, were found to be 95% effective with no serious long-term side effects that were statistically significant over rates of illness or medical conditions in the general population. And this goes through some reasons why this vaccine was able to be created so quickly. They built this vaccine using some prior technology, so it wasn't starting from ground zero. It was starting several steps into the process using prior vaccine studies and technology to use as a launching point. I would sort of question the next line. It says China isolated and shared genetic information about COVID-19 promptly, and people out there can argue if they would use the word promptly or not. But getting that sequence of the virus allowed the scientists to then jump in and really figure out what did they have to target with the virus. Vaccine developers did not skip testing. They didn't say, oh, well, I'm not gonna worry about that step. I'm just gonna jump over it. Essentially what we had going on in the mid part of 2020, once the whole virus spread and the pandemic developed and it was a worldwide thing and not just isolated to one region of the globe, is that multinational governments, corporations, scientific corporations, all jumped in on this and said, okay, we want to be in on this. So in the past, for instance, if Merck developed a vaccine and they said, hey, we want to develop a vaccine for meningitis, they were doing the entire process on their own. They were investing all of their money upfront and capital into developing this. They had to find all of their own volunteers. They had to do each step one by one. This time it was, numerous governments were pitching in and saying, hey, we need to get an answer. So here's money, take it, run with it, do your studies. One company was saying, okay, I'm going to test this part of the development. The next one was saying, okay, you've already got that, I'm jumping in on the next step. So it was not a one step at a time process. They were tag teaming to get that going faster. Which jumps to the next slide that said, yes, they had plenty of resources, government invested. The mRNA technology is something that has been around for years. It's been used in chemo research. They have been doing other vaccine research on it. Nothing that to date has come out and become a standard vaccine, but there have been other vaccines that have been built with that technology in mind. And I put a star at the next one because I think this is just so unique for this vaccine. I went back and looked in the vaccines we give in our office to kids and teens. The last one that was developed in recent times was the meningitis B vaccine, and that one was developed in 2015. If you think about our society's use of social media now compared to 6 years ago, it is a completely different animal. So when these companies were developing the vaccine and looking for volunteers, they were getting to that phase 3 and saying, okay, we need thousands of people to get into this phase of the study. They were blitzing people on social media. And it wasn't like Merck had to go out and okay, well, we'll go to hospital infectious disease doctors or colleges and see if, people would sign up. It was so much easier to get those people, that large number of people quickly to do that phase 3 study. And this goes back to what I was saying, the COVID is so contagious and widespread. It didn't take very long for them to see, okay, this spreads really fast. So we vaccinated this group and hey, they're not getting it all that much versus the general population who's not vaccinated. And Pfizer and Moderna were sort of hedging their bets and saying, yep, we really think this is going to work. We think this is going to take off. We hope we get the EUA. And they actually had built stockpiles of it before the FDA gave the emergency use authorization. So the minute that was given, it was ready to roll out and be distributed. It wasn't a time delay. So that's how it came about so quickly. In terms of the dosing for kids, their dosing is different. Adults who get the Pfizer vaccine get a 30 microgram dose. The kids will get a 10 microgram dose. Both sets of 12 and above or 5 to 11, they will get their 2 doses administered 3 weeks apart. That's just to sort of introduce the vaccine, the virus into, the look of the virus, because it's an inactivated virus. So your body sees something that looks like COVID and it says, oh, this is not good. I need to fight this. And then they get their second dose 3 weeks later so that the body goes, oh, yeah, I remember that bad thing. I need to fight that. I'm building my storehouse of antibodies. The dosing is determined by age. I get this question all the time. Well, I have a very tiny diminutive 6-year-old and my 11-year-old is this strapping, ready to play fullback. Why do they get the same dose? The answer is that your immune system and how it develops is much more related to your age than it is to your size of your body. So that's why they said, no, the younger kids, I don't care whether they weigh 50 pounds or 110 pounds, they're going to get the smaller dose, and then the older kids get the higher dose. As far as side effects, the number one that the kids in the 5 to 11 range reported was just pain at the site, which is pretty common for most vaccines. About 1/3 of them developed fatigue afterwards. 6% developed fever after their second shot. A small number of them said they had headaches or muscle aches. And they noted when Pfizer compared the data that there were definitely less side effects, less frequency of side effects in the younger kids versus the teens. This question comes up all the time about myocarditis and anaphylaxis. In the studies that they did for the 5 to 11 age vaccine, they had just over 3,000 subjects. There were no cases of myocarditis or anaphylaxis in any of those study groups. I will note that they probably needed a larger group to say, okay, would there be more than 1 in 3,000 kids in the general population that get myocarditis? So it may not have been a large enough study to separate out as a statistically significant versus general population. In general, the history, what we've seen with the older kids is that the 12 to 39 range, that's usually where we've seen the myocarditis. It's typically been in the first week or so after they receive their second dose. I will tell you that our office has been in contact with the cardiologists at Boston Children's and some of them locally as well throughout this whole time. And even with the risk for mild myocarditis, because the vast majority of patients who have gotten it have been have resolved over a week or 2 weeks after that, the cardiologists definitely say if we have to choose between get natural COVID and the potential cardiac risks that poses versus get the vaccine and the theoretical small risk of myocarditis, they overwhelmingly say, please encourage your patients to get the vaccine. For allergies, the only known contraindication to not receiving the COVID vaccine is if you have an allergy to polyethylene glycol, which is the normal ingredient of Miralax, or if you've had a reaction to a prior COVID vaccine. Individuals who have any food allergies, like a nut allergy, dairy allergy, something like that, or other medication allergies, are not thought to be at an increased risk for an allergy to COVID vaccine, but they may be asked to wait a little bit longer afterwards. Typically, they wait 15 minutes. They may be asked to wait like 30 minutes. Kids who are considered high risk for getting COVID are very definitely encouraged to get the vaccine, and those would include things like diabetes, asthma, obesity, immunodeficiency, sickle cell disease, congenital heart disease, or any chronic genetic, metabolic, or neurologic condition that could leave them in sort of a compromised state to begin with. Some parents have asked, okay, well, what if my kid had COVID back in July? Should they still get the vaccine? The answer is that we are encouraging people to do that. We know that natural immunity wanes over time. We don't have a perfect data chart to say, well, if you had it at this time, your immunity lasts this long. Move to the next slide, Aaron. Thanks. There's variability in how much of an immune response you make. So the thinking is that if you have an asymptomatic infection or a very mild infection, and we see numbers of patients that say, oh yeah, I had a runny nose for like 3 days and then I was fine. Those milder or asymptomatic infections may not leave them with much of an immune titer. And so it may not last as long if you don't build a strong immune response at the beginning. Getting the vaccine, they've done studies, and the vaccine after having natural COVID infection definitely boosts your immune titers, and it is safe. It has not caused an increased incidence of after effects from the vaccine. People are told that they basically just need to wait until their symptoms of COVID are resolved and they're past their isolation period. And at that point, they can get it at any time. This is another thing that I think is really important to know for how is safety data being tracked. Any of our previous vaccines that have been given, that first line, the VAERS, VAERS, that's Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, that has been in place for several decades. Up to date, this has been the only means of tracking vaccine safety. Now that we have specifically for the COVID vaccine, we have that one. We also have this Be Safe, and I don't know for anybody who's gotten their COVID vaccine, you may have participated. You sign up, you get a text message, you say, okay, I'll opt in. They text you daily for 7 days, then weekly for 6 weeks, then in 3, 6, and 12 months to ask you, have you had any side effects? How are you feeling today? Have you sought medical care for anything since your COVID vaccine? When I got it, it asked me if I was pregnant. Thankfully, no. They have had 9.5 million participants take place and 12 million surveys have been received so far. They're doing a specific pregnancy registry. So OB offices are assessing women in their first, second, and third trimesters, as well as at delivery and 3 months postpartum, to see if they've had any effects from their vaccine. 5,000 women have been enrolled, and there have been 24,000 surveys completed. So there is a lot that is being done above and beyond what we've ever done before for a vaccine to try to track and see if there is anything showing up that we need to be addressing. I've had people, I've read it in lay stuff, and I've had people ask, well, you know, the mRNA, isn't that like bad to get something like that? Is it gonna affect my cells? And the fact of the matter is, without going into a big biology lesson, mRNA is the messenger that comes in and says to your cell, this is what this virus looks like. Your body reads that message and makes a brand new set of DNA. mRNA never enters the nucleus of your cell where your DNA lives, so it cannot alter or change your DNA. The spike protein that we've all seen the little emblems of is unique from any other protein in your body. So your body cannot misread or substitute it and somehow incorporate it into some other genetic code in your body. Historically, with vaccines in the past, side effects are typically seen within 6 weeks, and so they monitor those studies to see any long-term side effects have really been only seen with live virus vaccines, such as the MMR or the Varivax, not with inactivated virus vaccines like this one. So this isn't something that we have any basis to believe that 6 years down the road, we're going to start seeing something, because that's not how inactivated virus vaccines have behaved. Last and most important question. Lots of parents have asked me this in the office. Why should my kid get the COVID vaccine if the infection is so mild and, you know, lots of kids just get a runny nose and 3 days later they feel fine. To date, from March, beginning of COVID pandemic, to October this year, in the 5 to 11 year age range, there have been 1.9 million confirmed laboratory tested cases of COVID. Infectious disease doctors estimate that because of mild infection, and somebody thought, oh yeah, they're just having allergies right now, they're fine, or asymptomatic infections, that the real number probably is somewhere between 5 to 10 million infections in that age group. 8,000 children have been hospitalized for COVID. A third of those, so roughly 2,600 hospitalizations, We're in kids that were essentially healthy kids, no significant past medical history to be worried about going into it. 5,200 cases of MIS-C, that's the inflammatory condition associated with COVID. This age group, 5 to 11, has been the bulk of those cases. It's not really so much something we see in teens or adults. There have been over 150 COVID-related deaths in that 5 to 11 age range. And the risk of long COVID is something that is still being studied and trying to be pinned down as far as numbers and risk. But that's symptoms like persistent headaches, muscle aches, fatigue, memory or concentration deficits, and exercise intolerance. And I have to think that this is our young kids that we are, hopefully growing and educating and going to learn well, and they enjoy sports and they want to play and excel. Those are not things that we want to have our kids dealing with for extended periods of time. That pretty much concludes the information I wanted to share with you guys. I took my sources from a couple different places I wanted to have integrity and show you. And then I put the reminder for the COVID clinic from 3 to 7. 7, thank you. So thank you for that opportunity to share information.
Thank you. Yeah, we have this presentation put up on all the schools' websites. So for
Yes.
parents that aren't here, I think that would be a good.
Yep. Absolutely. And I know I just shared Sarah from the newspaper, but we'll absolutely make sure.
Yeah, it's on all the schools' websites. Parents will get more access to it.
Yep. Any questions for Dr. Casper?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your time.
Very much, Dr. Casper. Thank you. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Gene, if I can ask you to join me, so we're gonna give we have a hard 9 o'clock stop time, so I'm trying to be mindful of that with being at Stonehill today. Before we go into my superintendent's report, which is gonna regard the strategic planning committee, just want to give a really quick shout out. Last night I went to the National Honor Society induction ceremony at Hwrsd High School. 89 students got inducted last night. So congratulations, it was a wonderful event. It was COVID related, so we couldn't have as many people, and you're probably wondering why you didn't get that invite, but it was only because students had X number of students, parents, they were allowed to bring in guests. But I know they did have it video, but congratulations to those students that were inducted to the National Honor Society last night. I mean, it was a really nice event. So the next thing I just want to talk to you about is a little bit of the strategic planning committee and the work that's going on. As you might be aware, we had to postpone our meeting that was scheduled for last night until December 8th. We're waiting guidance on whether these meetings are strategic planning committees have to be public or not. Maz has informed us, and this has been a question that's come up numerous times. In all the years that they've done it, it has not had to be public. But as you might be aware, at one of the public sessions, a select board member from Wilbraham asked us and said it should be public. We went to the select board in Wilbraham this past week, and again, it was brought up that they strongly recommend it was public, and from that, it sort of took a lifelong of its own. So us being respectful and not wanting an open meeting law violation, we deferred to our attorney. We're waiting for guidance on him to see exactly if our next strategic planning committee is going to be public or not. It is scheduled for December 8th. And at that time, before now and then, we'll be able to obviously have a decision, which I'll let school committee know, and then be able to post it within that 48 hours as well too. All this is just delaying the work that we need to do and be able to complete the strategic plan and be able to present it to not only the school committee, but the public, and then have the school committee vote on it. And the deadline is for the end of this school year to have that in place and ready to roll. I appreciate everyone's input that we've been receiving both by email and social media, but please know this is a process that was developed by Mars, and we need to trust in this process. And our hope is at the end of this year, we'll have a strategic plan that we haven't had for 21 years, And then we'll be able to implement it and move in the direction that we need to and that we're hearing from the community. Gina Khan's going to give us a little update on the committee members. Like the last meeting we were at, there was a question about who exactly is on the steering committee, and I know Gina's going to talk a little bit about that now. Any questions before we go into the part about the steering committee members, anything about the strategic plan at all at this point? Okay, Gina?
Sure. So the last time I was here with an update, we were just sorting out a little bit of final, are people in or out in terms of what had happened at that first meeting. And I did promise that I would return at the next meeting with an opportunity to share the members of the team. And I've done it really quickly because I know you guys don't have work to do. But I am going to share that we have 2 students, Abby Hale, no relation to Mr. Hale, Ellie Santos. We have an alumni, Max Merritt, a district administrator, Aaron Osborne. We have 3 school principals with us, Steve Hale, Serenity Greenwood, and Sharon Mulberg. And I should say Steve from Minichog, Serenity from School Road, but formerly from Fort Burgess, and Sharon Mulberg from Green Meadows. For our boards of select people representation, we have Craig Ribas from the Hampton Board of Selectmen, and their appointed member, Greg Castellano. For Wilbraham Board of Selectmen, we have Teresa Goodrich, and their appointed designee, that is Tracy Farnsworth. We have a number of parents, guardians, and community members at large, and we've had conversation about the great response that we received to that original outreach, and particularly for our Wilbraham neighbors, more than we could have accommodated on the team. And so I would like to present to you from Hampton, Lynn Langlois, Cynthia Miller, Kim Montano, Mary Ellen Glover, Anne Marie Noel, Gary Smith, and Amanda Whittier. Amanda kind of is double duty because she is a parent, but she is also a teacher at Green Meadows. From Wilbraham, Aaron Abdamessa, Christina Ellen, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably mess this up. Alvin Chippy, Deco.
Yep.
We have Valerie Neer, Renee Bracy, Karen Rysel, Joe Lawless, Mike Mazuka, Karen McGill, I'm sorry, Jessica McGill, and Beth Nelson. For our teacher representatives, Kathy Leo, a teacher at Full Road, John Steiner, for Minchard, Chris Lissipernot, who is our head custodian here at Stony Hill. Amanda Whittier, we already said, is cross-referenced as a Hampton parent, a designee from Hampton. And Anthony Zarembo, who is at TWB as the transitional program teacher. Having his input provides a very unique perspective. The HWEA rep is Patty Polkus, and she is also a teacher at Mile Tree. And then, as you know, we have, thank you so much, 2 school committee representatives, Maura Ryan and Bill Longevity. It's a large group. We need to get to work. There's a lot of work to be done. The next task will be to finalize the survey, that very important piece of soliciting data and feedback from the community. And so in this meeting that is now happening on December 8th, I see you, we will be working on the survey as well as the mission and vision language. And members of the team who have not yet had the opportunity to do a SWOT analysis will be asked to participate in that. Sean, you have a question for me?
Yeah. So there's 7 members from Hampton and 9 from Wilbraham. I was under the impression there was 9 from Hampton.
So I think when that number was discussed, the 9 had to do with the 9 had been recommended, but 2 of those
are under the board of selectmen. So that is not, but if we added two to the Wilbraham, that would be 11, yes.
The only thing we don't have for you is the location for December 8th, depending if it has to be a public forum or a public meeting. And again, it's a working group. It's a workshop that we're going to be working on with the school. They're going to be compiling all the information from SWOT. They're then going to be giving it to myself as a superintendent and my admin team. And then therefore, then we're going to be working on the goals for this district, the goals and how we're going to reach those goals that I will be presenting to the school committee in the community. The one thing we don't have.
Why would this need to be a public meeting?
I don't know the answer to that, John. So that's why it has been brought up numerous times to us, and I'm going to just say it. People are feeling that we're not being transparent by not having a public. So for not to us to get the district in trouble or getting us into a situation where we have an open meeting law violation, I defer to our attorney and wait for him to give us guidance on that.
Oh, so in order for people to attend and watch the meeting, would have to be on the meeting. No, right? Anyone.
It would have to be open according to the definition of open in order to attend.
Say that again.
I don't know if I can. I was kind of anticipating the question. In order for people to attend, it would have to be officially designated as an open meeting. Is that what you were asking?
No, I was just thinking like, does it have to be an open meeting in order for people to attend?
So Sean, one of the things that we heard from Mars is that they said that, the meetings have never been open to the public because the idea is specifically when you were trying to develop the survey, you would use your steering committee to direct and drive the questions, how they would be answered. And then that way it would give people, when it was released to everyone, it would give everybody the same opportunity to, with the exception of the steering committee members who came up with the questionnaire, so people wouldn't have those questions in advance or be able to be swayed to some degree. And in all honesty, I'm really surprised that all of a sudden it now has to be an open meeting because it's never been that way. I don't necessarily know that. I mean, for the forums, I can understand them being public, maybe doing more than just two. But as far as the steering committee goes, we've never needed, or I've never seen any steering committee need to be in an open meeting.
So who's saying that it has to be an
I believe the request came from the Wilbraham Board of Selectmen, right, Al?
So when we had our public session that took place in Wilbraham, it was brought up numerous times that they believe that this should be a public meeting. And then when we met with the select board in Wilbraham again, it was stated very strongly that it should be a public meeting. So, I'm not a lawyer, and certainly I don't want to get our district in a situation where that we're going to have an open meeting law violation. So I just defer to our attorney to find out if it has to be an open meeting or not. Mars has said in the past they have not had to have it be open. But I guess at this point, when we get this many questions, and it's certainly we received numerous emails, we felt the right thing to do is contact our attorney and get some input from him.
Al, did the attorney say when he was going to get you a response? Because this is time sensitive. I'm sorry, Sean, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So he didn't, I sent him a follow-up email today. I think he's getting a little guidance on this to give us the right information as well too. He knows that I'm looking to have it, but obviously within this next couple of days, so this way we can be prepared for December 8th and know where we're gonna have it, right? So we're set to have it at TWB. We rearranged the location at TWB for to fit the grouping of the strategic plan. But I'm gonna be very honest with you, if it is an open meeting, which again, if that's what it needs to be, I'm not really sure what it's gonna look like. Like, I'm not sure exactly how to set that up. Working group here, having people like maybe in the back, like listening to us having that working group conversation. I'm not sure. So I gotta get advice from the attorney, and then we'll figure out logistically how I'm gonna do that as well too.
So he isn't giving you a specific date?
No, but I reached out to him right before I came in. He could have responded back to me. So we just found this out as of yesterday. The meeting was supposed to happen Monday night. We're in the select board.
Thank you.
I think one thing that, regardless of the outcome of this determination, I think we are committed to communication around the process. And I think that if we maybe sit through the underlying message, I think that's probably the priority. So we will definitely be thinking of better ways to keep everyone informed in terms of the progress. And there's been a number of ideas about doing that, using the website a little bit more consistently around that. So that's where we're at. And we are looking forward to getting to work, and we look forward to resolving this soon.
And we'll have a couple of public forums that Gina and I and people on the strategic planning committee can attend to give people in the public that want to know more information. But there really is work that needs to be done, and so we can get this done.
And now, before we wrap up, just one more sincere thanks to all of the people that volunteered, whether or not they were ultimately selected. It is just such a phenomenal symbol of the dedication and commitment of these two towns and our whole learning community, that people care about this enough to be talking about it. So it's all, you know, I think we think it's a good thing.
Yep. Questions?
Aaron.
Alrighty. So you have a budget report. I'm going to call out a few quick items that I think are worth noting. You'll notice again our substitute line right now. We encumbered and spend funds. We are at 75% of our substitute budget. We do have access to some funding in ESSER money to offset that later. We can and will. I think, as I shared, so many of these long-term, we have many long-term substitutes right now, and I expect we'll have many more during the year. There are definitely a couple factors. I think I jokingly shared that we seem to have a bit of a COVID baby boom, as it were. And we congratulate all of our new parents. It's kind of fantastic, but you know, they end up going on leave for periods of time, as they will have the right. We are also, obviously, COVID has an impact. We're also finding and realizing that a lot of people put off surgeries. So people who had, you know, chronic issues, things like that they would ordinarily have gone to surgery for, weren't able to do so during COVID last year. And now, as hospitals are opening up, there's availability, people are having some of those procedures done. Normal, we have a normal number, in a normal year. I think now we've got, you know, probably a 12 to 18 month backlog sort of piling up, right? Again, normal, something they have rights to and we support, but just the fact of life. So we definitely anticipate that going over budget. We also scroll further down. I think I joked about this $250. I had no idea where it came from. I do recall, I think we had to match some money in our Title I grant this year, and I put that in to match that money. We had to put $250 towards, I think, this specific line item of all things, this area. So I put it in, we'll move it somewhere later. It's, you know, I thought it was kind of funny that somehow I put $250 in something for no parents. The next items that I think we're looking at are separation costs. You'll see that that is a little bit over budget. That is, if you follow the lines, it's down to the 5150 line item if you're scrolling through. Again, we've had more retirements in the past year. That are coming. Again, this isn't something we budget, interestingly, so we could budget it. It usually offsets somewhere. We do have to report it to DESI at the end of the year. So, you know, I think we could start looking at budgeting that one and putting it in the budget. We're also looking at a lot of 45-day assessments. A lot of students who you know, have some pretty severe challenges right now. So I do expect some of our sort of out of district costs to increase. Our hope is to keep the students in district, to return them after the 45-day evaluation period, game plans and things like that. That is something Gina and I are speaking just keeping tabs on where we are, knowing when those are occurring and what the status of those. So we'll continue to monitor those. See, our collaborative commission was higher than we expected. That's fully encumbered. That is transitioning some students from higher cost private placements into collaborative placements. So you'll see we do have some excess funds in some other areas. So it's really just an offset. Our collaborative placements are typically lower cost. And it's funded through our collaborative, which we're a partner. So sort of the more we fund through the collaborative, the more effective our funds are collaborative. So we look at that next year and think about how to budget accordingly. Think about those costs. Any questions other than that?
My question is from the SWOT analysis that I went to, Savant talked about significant changes in the curriculum at levels, particularly in the trades. And are we looking forward, thinking to how we would fund that?
That is a tough one. We have to start looking at, Lisa and I have been talking about what our curriculum looks like. She has some thoughts on curriculum. I know we met with the high school principal the other days. We talked data. He had math and the ELA department heads with him. They were talking about the age of some of their math textbooks. Geometry, in particular in algebra. Jokingly stated triangles don't change that much in 10, 20 years, but the math principles have changed the way we learn and things like that. So I think it's important that we start doing some of those curriculum reviews. There is no, as I was saying, there's no magic pot of money, but I'd like to look at where we can do some reallocations this year, next year, maybe shake the tree a little bit, by looking at that area. We've also had conversations about long-term interventionists. I think you were all at the last meeting where talk of additional administration came up as well. So where all of that comes from is certainly a bit of a mystery at the moment. We'd like to shake the tree and see what comes out. Again, I think I've stated that there are some things we can do. Dean and I are going to talk about in-district programming, so we're not sending some of these things out of district. That would represent an investment we can make now, so cost savings. It's a question to think about how we might have incremental choice students that we mix as well, without overburdening us with a tremendous number of choice students. But how do we make use of that opportunity? So those are conversations I think we should have in terms of finding money. That's everything we're talking about costs money, right? So but there are things we want to do. Anything else? One very small way. Oh, sure.
Since we're to Al, we had we both a couple years ago about the program for 2-year-olds at Western and then COVID struck and never got back to that. That was going to have an economic impact to us in the public side of the can you just hold that?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear anything. I'm sorry. I'm getting old too. I apologize.
A couple years ago, when we were was to meet with Westfield State and the program job opportunities that was at Westfield. If you remember that, but COVID struck and never got done. But there was some impact economically for us, and we're wondering if that can be revisited now that things are back in the normal.
Sure, I think that, I'll go back and look, Cheryl, I think the Westfield State one was a recruitment of Westfield State with the students coming in, if I recall that correctly, and trying to set up a more of, trying to create a bench with Westfield State and the students.
No, that was for, teachers who were, special ed, the intensive, 18-to 22-year-olds, to give them, opportunities to have a working ball, work training on campus.
So we do that, so, want to take that?
Is that happening?
So, Cheryl, with the 18 to 22-year-old program, we talked about Toyo Community College and having a collaboration with them. So in our program right now, we have 5 students that are actually taking classes at Toyo Community College. In addition to taking the classes, they participate in community events at Toyo Community College. So we are utilizing them to give our kids a great experience.
I'll go back and check, I'm not sure it was Westfield. Took my mic. I'm not sure if it was Westfield, but I will go back and check, but I think it was Holyoke. Yeah, it's Holyoke.
So Cheryl, you might have been thinking, we did have one student that was in the Macy program at Westfield State, so that's what you were thinking.
Yeah. And I thought we were going to try to. But it sounds like Holyoke has.
It's a better match as far as the course offerings go for our students.
And hence the reason, sorry. And that's the reason why the van, and students going there is well, too, that's part of that, all of transporting them.
I'm glad that's happening.
Yeah, and we have 2 students who are doing the internship. So we have kids in the community. It's just COVID has kind of like prevented us from doing all that we would normally be doing in the community, but we still do get out with these amount.
Aaron, I'm going to steal screen sharing. So I'm very quickly going to share with the committee in starting to put together some of the budgetary numbers. Dr. Bunton did this a little familiar, but a little more compressed. It's just this current year. So relative to last year, as we start the budget, the very first piece of information I have is student counts, October 1st student counts. And I just wanted to share that, at least for this year right now, it seems the Wilbraham Creek, the creek of students towards Wilbraham, weighted towards Wilbraham, seems to be continuing. A little bit more creek than occurred last year, less than the prior year. The very big impact, the biggest impact of last year's budget in terms of it moving towards Wilbraham was a shift in the state's minimum local contribution calculation that you would recall. That we will not know until, I think, the January timeline. So we are, really this isn't a huge shift, but if it were coupled again with another shift in minimum local contribution, again, that can present other challenges. So we're going to keep our eye on this. And hopefully the state numbers and data will come out as early as possible. Usually it's mid to late January. So.
If I can just point out for people who are watching, so the student count is actual students from the towns, not school choice. So that's why those numbers are off from our actual knowledge.
Yeah. Addresses in either Hamden or addresses in Wilbraham.
Right. Thank you.
Good point.
Aaron, you can have it back. I just wanted to give that quick update. We did share it with the FinComs, and so I think it's fairly shared here as well.
Michelle, can I make a recommendation that we vote on the consent agenda and vote on the over $500, and then we can go into the rest?
Yes.
Cool. Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Okay.
All in favor?
Sorry, Sean, what did you just say, Sean?
To accept the consent agenda, which is the warrants and we have to vote individually on the donation.
And I think And I think Michelle was just going to mention a little bit of the donations that came in from the one family in particular for Green Meadows, which is, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Green Meadows received very generous donations from the Flynn family for the John M. Literacy Center at Green Meadows. Those donations totaled $32,500.
So not only does Ms. Moberg, as you might see, send thank you notes, but we'll send thank you notes on behalf of the school committee as well too, and the district office.
I believe we have to vote on these. And so I make a motion to accept the $10,000 donation from Christina and Francis Flynn from Stanford, California. $10,000 from Thomas and Jolene Holmes from Somerville, Massachusetts. $2,000 from Thomas and Kathy Flynn of Beverly Hills, Florida. $2,500 from Mary McCrory. And $8,000 from Thomas and Kathy Flynn from also Beverly Hills, Florida.
That sheet that the sheet that Sean's reading from, is that not in the folder? So I'm looking all the attachments that were in the folder from Erin. Is that not included? Did that come in after the folder was created?
I did, sorry, no, it's not in the folder.
It's not in the folder.
I'll add.
Sean, could you just, and I know it's down in the bottom, or Michelle, just the reason, the donation where it's going to, just so people understand.
Oh, okay, the donations have been made on behalf of the Literacy Center named in honor of their late father, John M. Flynn at Green Meadows.
Thank you, Michelle.
All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call. Sorry. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl? Aye. Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Maura?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll do subcommittee updates. Cheryl, do you have one for the curriculum subcommittee? Finance and operations, Bill?
Yeah, 1 minute. We met on Monday night, as Aaron stole my thunder. Thank you, Aaron, but the graphic is actually very helpful. It shows us a 1% shift in the population year over year. If we look at a $24 million assessment budget to the town of Wilbraham, it comes out to about a $240,000 shift. So what that means is that the increased assessment from last year to this year, $240,000 of that is being chewed up just by that population shift. Okay, so this is a phenomenon we've been seeing for the last few years. Last year, I believe it was 0.35% shift. The year before that, it was a 1.35% shift. We continue to see that trend. That was a discussion that we had at the Finance and Operations Subcommittee meeting. We were planning a budget roundtable meeting with the school committee, the select boards from both town, the Finance and Operations, the Finance Committee from Wilbraham, and the Advisory Committee from Camden. And what we want to get out of that meeting is basically a working group with representatives from those particular bodies so that we can work in concert with the strategic plan to try to find a workable solution for this. Those shifts have been hurting. This is the last 6 years we've seen literally from 75-25 to basically 80-20, which is a huge shift in resources from the town of Wilbraham. And if we continue on that path, it's simply not sustainable. Coupled with the shift in minimum local contribution, the state has been continually decreasing the amount of money that is provided through minimum local contribution, which helps urban school districts that typically will fund their school district up to MLC, but don't do any additional assessments to the people in town. But to rural school districts like HWRSD, it hurts because that's just, it doesn't change anything except it increases the assessment to the numbers of both towns. So we're planning a working group. We set a tentative date for January 13th. I did send a letter to Aaron, got it today. I sent you the letter. Oh, okay, so I sent the letter today, or I sent the letter to Aaron today that we signed. And then will be sent out, and hopefully that'll work. We did talk about a potential date, I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it before, but we sent out, we sent a date for the 13th. With a snow date the following Thursday. We have a school committee meeting that day, but if it runs in, then we'll have to just supply one to the other. So that's all I got.
Any
Sorry,
questions?
more than-
That's fine. Questions? Thank you. Lisa, have anything for the collaborative?
Nothing for that meeting from yesterday. We did have a quorum and they went over 150 page audit in 15 minutes and my brain almost melted and that was the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything to report on the corporation. There is a new president. Can you remind me of her name? From Agawam.
A new person from Apple.
Yeah, what was her name?
Ontario O'Connor.
Yeah, she's the new president of the. No, she's from the Agawam School Committee.
She works for us.
Oh, she does?
She works for us.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know that. I didn't know she was doing that job remote by
I met her last night. Okay.
She works for us as well too.
Cool.
Sorry, we digress.
And then for negotiation subcommittee, we've been actively meeting. And then more, do you have an update on the policy subcommittee?
Wait, hang on 1 second, for the negotiations subcommittee, should we have an executive session when we start sharing this information with the whole committee? Actually, I thought we were going to be doing that today. But just so the committee knows that we have exchanged.
We can do that at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sure. Next meeting. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So, policy sub, our last meeting had to get canceled because it wasn't posted. And I will be reaching out to the members of the subcommittee to set up a new meeting date for most likely December, since we're so close into the holidays. The MASC has sent out a whole review listing for a specific section D, which I'm sure most people who get the MASC emails probably saw that come from them. So we'll start to target some of that. I have to reach out to Al and Kate to see if we can finally get through and go over some of the stuff where it got left off from last year to this year to bring everything more current. And then to get Erin kind of involved in the letters that Kate used to put together for the readings when we did the first reading, second and third reading. So I think there'll be more for December than there will be for this month.
Hey, Aaron, just as a correction, Ronnie has that.
Oh.
I sent it to Ronnie.
Okay, is there anything that anyone would like for future agenda items? We have a few items you can see. Sorry, Sean, I do have the executive session for the next meeting. Good.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Maura?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks,
It's
everybody.
9:03.
Good meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Al.